Hello, welcome back to Rapid Regeneration. I'm Dave Escamilla. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not making any claims about diseases or medical claims, and nor is my guest. I am so honored today to be here talking with Don Bennett, and excited to share with you some of Don's information. And so we're going to ask Don about how he got into this and his many decades of experience helping other people and avoiding disease because Don is described as a disease avoidance specialist. He's figured out what we're all trying to figure out, which is how to live a long, healthy life free of health problems. And so Don takes a very empirical, logical, common sense approach to figuring out these kind of questions. And Don will also be appearing at Texas Fruit Festival to share this information. And so, Don, someone I've learned from personally, I've read his books, I've learned from his information. I'm so grateful to how he's helped me and helped other people. So, that was the introduction. Don, thank you so much for taking some time with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, I want to ask you kind of where it all started. Can you give us an idea of how long now have you been into a healthy lifestyle, healthy diet for yourself? And I understand you had some health issues. You weren't getting straight answers from medical people, and you kind of took matters in your own hands, or what happened? Can you take us back into how you got into this and kind of how long that journey has been for you?
Well, yeah, it kind of started when I was a lot younger and I saw people in my own family living to over 100 in reasonably good health, just dying in their sleep of nothing specific. But other people in my family were living to, their early 60s and dying of something horrific. And, contrast is everything, right? So I'm looking, I'm like, okay, I want to know why these people in my family lived to over 100 and with no big issues, and these people were dying at 62 from cancer or whatever. Because I want to be like those people, not those people. And so there's got to be a reason. And I wasn't even thinking about the genetic aspect of it. But again, now we see that these were people all in my own family. So there would have to have been something other than genetics that was the cause of this. So it turned out to be, lifestyle practices, and that's what I discovered. So then I decided to say, okay, we all have a health potential. I always my favorite character growing up was Mr. Spock on Star Trek
Hmm.
because he was very logical. You couldn't cause him to argue with you, and there were people that tried to argue with him about something. The ship's doctor would always try to argue with him about something, and the ship's doctor would get very passionate about something, and Mr. Spock would just be very dispassionate about it, very logical, very rational. And I said, I want to be like Mr. Spock. It's the best way to look at something, because if you start getting all, emotional about it, then maybe you're not going to be thinking too clearly. So I wanted to look at things logically, and in doing so, I started to realize certain things like, well, I have a health potential. Well, we all have a health potential, actually. We don't know what it is in advance, but yet we all have one. Okay, that's a given. No one's going to argue. I like things where nobody argues with me, because when I was a little kid, my parents argued a lot and it was very distressing. So I said, I want to grow up not arguing. That's another reason I like Mr. Spock, because he wouldn't argue with anybody,
Hmm.
because he just dealt with facts and logic and rational critical thinking. So that's how I patterned myself after that. So I said, all right, we all have a health potential. I have a health potential. Now, how do I reach my health potential? What do I have to do? Well, am I eating what I should be eating? Well, let's think about that. And then I realized, well, probably not, because we didn't start off eating cooked food. There was no way to cook it. So, and no other animal in the wild today eats cooked food. so probably cooked food isn't a good thing to eat. But before I even got to that, I just was looking at what I was eating. So I said, all right, probably not designed to eat animals. Now, again, there was no internet back then. So there was
Okay.
no me researching this to find out about. I didn't know what the word veganism was. I didn't know what the term natural hygiene was. They existed, but I didn't know that. And you're not going to find that information in the library. So I was just left up to my own devices, thinking about things very logically. And I said, all right, I'm probably not designed to eat these things that I'm eating. Let me get them out of my diet. In fact, let me get anything out of my diet that I have to cook to be able to eat. It just seemed logical to me. So what I was doing was figuring out the tenets of natural hygiene without knowing that natural hygiene existed. And imagine how I felt when I discovered there was this thing called natural hygiene. Because as an aside, one day someone said, oh, you're one of those natural hygienists. I'm like, what is that? Hygienist? That isn't that the person who cleans your teeth at the dentist's office? No, no, no. These are a bunch of nutty people. They eat the way you do. They only drink water, and they really care about their health. Like that's a bad thing, right? And they're having a meeting at Hofstra University coming up in about a week because he went to Hofstra University. So I said, really? Okay, I got to see this. And I went there, and there they were. There were 90 people who had figured out or learned what I had figured out for myself. And I was just overjoyed because, Dave, before that point in time, I thought, well, I'm going to be the only person doing this. Who else would be crazy enough to do what I'm doing? Maybe a dozen people around the world. How would I even find those dozen people? But there were 90 people right there at Hofstra University at a conference. And I was like, I shed a tear over that. It was just so great to find them. And then I started learning about people like Herbert Shelton and John Tilden, etc. But up to that point, no, I just basically figured it out for myself because I wanted to be like the people on this side of my family, not like the people on that side of my family. I wanted to live to my health potential. And by the way, like I said, we all have a health potential. And you might say, well, you can't really quantify it. You can't compare me to you because our genetics are totally different and genetics play a role. And then I said, well, wait a minute, you can put a number on it on a scale of 1 to 10. So everyone has a scale of 1 to 10 for their health potential, 10 being the healthiest they individually can be. Think about it. They individually can be. So I decided a long time ago, once I figured that out, that you can quantify it, you can put a number on it individually for each person. I said, well, okay, I want to be a 10. What do I have to do to be a 10? And in some of my talks, I ask people who wants to be on a scale of 1 to 10, who wants to be a 4? No one raises their hand. 5, no one raises their hand. 6, no one raises their hand. But one time I said 7, somebody raised their hand. One person in the audience raised their hand. I kept going, 8, 9, 10, and a lot of hands went up for 10. And I talked to that person later. I said, how come you said you wanted to be a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10? And he said, because I know what I would have to do to be a 10, and I ain't willing to do it. I'm like, okay, I can respect that as long as you understand that you're going to be, you're shooting for 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. So I like to surround myself with people who understand that concept and want to be a 10 and want to do whatever's necessary to get there. So just to give you the timeline, I've been researching health issues for about 51 years, so over half a century.
Wow.
I've been vegan for half a century, 50 years. Raw vegan, 23 years, teaching for 29, and counseling for 22 years. So that just gives you the timeline. So now today, as of today, I'm over 70. So there you go. Yeah, so that just so I started teaching stuff that I learned, but I didn't start counseling yet because that's a huge responsibility because
Yes.
we're talking about people's health. So I said, all right, I really do want to counsel. And when I first started teaching and giving free lectures, people said, oh, can I counsel with you? And I remember the first time someone said that to me, I'm like, well, no, not yet. That's what I said. She goes, what do you mean not yet? I said, I got a lot more learning to do before I feel comfortable enough where I can counsel people. Because again, huge responsibility. So it took me a bunch of years after I started, about another 7 years after I started teaching, before I hung out a shingle and started counseling people. But yeah, and I've never looked back. It's been great helping people. The two greatest joys in my life were making people laugh when I used to perform as an entertainer, making people laugh for a living. That was great. Imagine just being up on stage and making 400 people just laugh their asses off because of what I'm saying and doing on stage. And the other joy was just helping people get rid of diabetes, asthma, chronic fatigue syndrome, blah, 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 all the rest of them. So yeah, that's my story up to this point.
Well, and Don Bennett is someone who has helped a lot of people and is constantly helping a lot of people. You heard him right now, over 70 years old, and I see Don constantly on in his Facebook group. He has a Facebook group called uh, the healthiest raw vegan diet Facebook group with a ton of members. He's always in there for free, answering questions, helping people. You can check out his books. His books are excellent. He has video programs and also does counseling and plus a ton of articles at health101.org. I understand that the top 12 voted on most helpful articles that Don has written are at health101.org/reading. And so these are resources that you can see Don's commitment to helping you, the listener. And so, it seems like people struggle to make a change um, if they're just in a status quo and they're in kind of a comfort zone, that it takes some level of pain or discomfort generally for people to make a change. So when you go back and you notice that these people in your family or someone in your family died prematurely in their early 60s, was that painful or what did that feel like to you at that time to experience that loss?
Well, yeah, any loss is tragic for most people, but it also was the norm. I mean, that the average life expectancy back then, I think, was around 70. So people dying at 65 to 75, that just seemed like the norm. What was shocking to me is that I knew two people, my grandparents, who were living to over 100. I was like, what? How old is grandma? Are you over 100? I didn't think that was possible. That's what was shocking. Not that everyone's dying in their 60s or early 70s. So I saw that it was possible to live and be in great shape, by the way, when they were 100 and just dying in their sleep. And when people would ask me, I think I was a teenager, and they said, what's your goal in life, Don? I said, to die in my sleep. And they're like, oh, what's wrong with this guy? But what a great goal, really. Just to die in your sleep. Just one night you go to sleep, you're 100, 102, 105, whatever it is, and you just don't wake up the next day. As opposed to dying the way I've seen a lot of people die in my family and others, of something horrible, you just degenerating.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was distressing, but now that I'm helping people avoid that, I'm thinking ahead 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years that they're going to be living to a ripe old age, dying of nothing, nothing specific. Cause of death on their death certificate will be non-specific organ failure, meaning dying of old age of nothing specific. So that's a great thing to help people do that.
Yeah. And were you always curious and always kind of questioning authority, questioning conventional wisdom? Because some people would see you probably as a bit of a rebel or a bit of, thinking outside the box.
Yeah, well, my mom taught me, I'll never forget this, think with your own brain, not with other people's brains. Your brain is just as good as their brain as far as thinking is concerned. Maybe you can't do math as well as they can, but you can do something better than they can. There's a lot of that going on, but thinking wise, no. Think with your own brain. Don't think with somebody else's. They don't call it television programming for nothing, is what another thing she said. So yeah, I became suspicious of. And I remember this one time I was really, really young, and I asked an adult a question. because I was curious, and the adult said the answer was no. I don't even remember what the question was. But what stuck in my mind is the adult said, oh, the answer to your question is definitely no. Okay, and I just adopted it without researching it, without questioning it. So then I went on and had a conversation with some other people, and there was an adult there and I said, oh, no, the answer to that is no. And that adult said, no, that's not correct. The answer to that is yes. And I'm like, uh-oh. Oh, no, I fell into a trap somewhere. One of these two adults is wrong because it's an objective question. It's either yes or no. There's no opinions associated with whatever this question was. So one of these two adults is wrong. Was it the first one I listened to or this one? And that's when I learned, okay, before adopting what somebody's saying as their position and making it yours, research it, verify it, because that's when I learned for the first time that adults can be wrong. Because up until that moment, I didn't think adults could be wrong. You get to, sure, kids like me, we could be wrong about things, but adults, no, about objective things. I'm not talking about opinions. So that's when I learned, oh my God, my world has just crashed down around my feet. Adults can be wrong. Oh no, I guess I have to think for myself. And that's how I became more of a researcher. And that's what I would tell everybody watching this. And whenever I speak and give a presentation, I'm always saying the same thing. Learn as a researcher, not as a student. Because students, students will ask questions of clarification maybe, but they won't question what they're being taught by whoever's teaching them. Researchers, on the other hand, question everything. And it's nothing personal. That's just what they do, because technically adults can be wrong about objective things. So they question everything to verify. And that's why also I try and stick with, just like Mr. Spock, objective things, facts. You couldn't get Mr. Spock to give you an opinion on something. His race, the Vulcans that he came from, totally logical. They don't have even a word in their language for opinions, because opinions can be very subjective. So I wanted to stick with facts. I wanted to do it as a researcher. So that's what I tell everybody. Don't learn from any one person, even myself included. Research everything that you're hearing to vet it. And by the way, don't just vet the information, vet the person giving you the information. Because if you vet the information and then you discover, oh, some of this information is wrong. 90% is correct, but 10% is incorrect. Okay, well, now you got to figure out, why did you get 10% incorrect information from that raw vegan educator that you thought you could just follow fully 100%? And then you start to find out certain things. Oh, well, he seems to have a bias against supplements, and so you really want to get to know whoever you're learning from, because this is not like learning how to do pottery. Because when you're doing pottery, what's the biggest mistake you can make? You make a mug where the handle falls off the mug. Okay, that's no big deal. But you're learning about your future health. And, I tell everybody, if you're following somebody and 30, 40, 50, 60 years in the future, you see that it didn't work for you, because that's, by the way, when you'll know if something worked for you. So if someone says, oh, just do whatever works for you. Well, you're not going to know that for a very, 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 very long time. And I guarantee you, 100% guarantee, that you won't have access to a time machine if things go horribly wrong for you to go back to 2025 to pick a different raw vegan diet. And by the way, you said before, the name of my Facebook group is the healthiest raw vegan diet. Well, doesn't that infer there are other raw vegan diets? Yes, there are 7. And if you go to that page that you mentioned, health101.org/reading, one of those articles is the 7 different raw vegan diets, because there are 7. Now, right now, people's heads are exploding. I can hear them from here. Like,
Yes.
7 different raw vegan diets? I thought that was just the raw vegan diet. And when anyone says to me, like, I'll talk about diet, and they'll say, I'm doing the raw vegan diet. I'm like, well, you can't be, because there's multiple raw vegan diets. So you're doing a raw vegan diet. Okay, which of the raw vegan diets are you doing? And they're like, they don't know how to answer the question. What are the different raw vegan diets? So in that article, it'll explain the 7 different raw vegan diets. And if you're thinking that, all right, they're different from one another, but they're all equally as healthy. Well, does that even make sense? It could be that way? Unlikely. So then you start to realize, okay, I see. There's a really unhealthy one all the way up at the other end of the spectrum, the healthiest one. So that's why the Facebook group is called the healthiest raw vegan diet. So if you really care about your health and you want to have excellent future health, the best health you can possibly have throughout your whole entire life, number 10 till the day you die, then you'd want to be eating the healthiest diet for a human being that there is to eat, which is a raw vegan diet, but it's also the raw vegan diet that's healthy, because believe me, there's some unhealthy raw vegan diets.
Okay, so again, this goes back to Don's key audience, or the person that would most want to follow Don's work, is someone who would say, "I want 10 out of 10 health. I want to eat the most ideal thing that's going to make me the healthiest and have the most longevity." And so you talk about the different types of raw vegan diets, and you're considered one of the foremost experts in the raw vegan uh, diet, but you just mentioned that there's all these subcategories, and so where do you see people struggling? Is it the fact that they just don't understand the differences between the types, or is it that they do understand but they don't want to eat the healthiest one and because it's not as tasty, or where are the pitfalls that you see people kind of struggling with once they go into the raw vegan kind of rabbit hole?
Yeah, and I wrote an article on this, on raw vegan diet fails and why they happen. The main cause, the absolute main cause, is because most people who discover or bump into a raw vegan diet, they do it through a particular person who's teaching it, or that person was recommended to them. So they go there. Now, if that person is teaching the healthiest of the raw vegan diets, then that's great. Their first exposure to the raw vegan diet is with the healthiest of the raw vegan diets. But if that person, even though that educator is very well intentioned and very well meaning, they just had the misfortune to learn from someone teaching not the healthiest of the raw vegan diets. Now that's what that person's going to be learning to do. And I've found quite a number of people who have failed to thrive on a raw vegan diet, unbeknownst to them, because they were just doing one of the less healthy raw vegan diets. But they didn't know there were multiple raw vegan diets. They just thought it was that one, and that's what the person's teaching. Like a vegan diet is, a vegan diet is just obvious what it is. It doesn't include any animal products. That's pretty straightforward, right? So they just assume that the raw vegan diet, same thing. It's vegan, and you can eat anything as long as you don't have to cook it. Well, that's not even entirely true, because there are things sold in stores that you can eat without cooking them. They're just not good for you for various reasons. Okay, so, and unfortunately, some raw vegan educators, that's what they teach. As long as you don't have to cook it, whatever you can eat, that's your food. That's food meant for human beings. Well, no, not necessarily so. You can't judge by what you find in a huge market like Sprouts or Whole Foods or one of these kind of places. You can't judge what human beings are designed to eat by looking in the produce section and saying, oh, I can eat everything here because everything here I can eat uncooked for the most part. Certain things you can't, you just leave those out. But that's not true either. So the vast majority of the people who have failed to thrive just had the misfortune of learning a less healthy raw vegan diet. Now, of the 7, what's the one that is the most causes the most issues, you don't get to thrive, is the one taught by people who say, and this is the educator saying this, once you start eating an all raw fruit and vegetable diet, you don't have to be concerned about nutrition. Now that's a quote from a popular raw vegan educator. The problem with that quote is it isn't true. It was true 50,000 years ago. It's just not true today, because of where we get our food from today. Where we get it from today, most of us, is way different than where we got it 50,000 years ago. So if you end up believing that And that implies you don't need any kind of nutritional supplementation. And these folks will usually, if you ask them specifically about nutritional supplementation, they will say, no, 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 not, A, not necessary, B, it's bad for you, so, and you don't need it, so why even discuss it? But that's been a cause of a lot of people's failings. And now, not to get into the weeds, this is just before the weeds begin. There's two classifications of nutrients. There's food-provided nutrients and non-food-provided nutrients. Okay, I think we can all figure that out. The food-provided nutrients, there are many, many dozens, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, etc. The non-food-provided nutrients, I think if I asked people and they gave a few minutes to think about it, they would say, well, vitamin D, that comes from the sun, and B12, maybe they know our bodies are supposed to make that, but again, it's not supposed to come from food. So there's a few of the non-food provided nutrients. And a lot of raw vegan educators are teaching about food and diet and the foods we should be eating. They don't even bother touching upon vitamin D and B12. Now think about that, Dave. You're going from the typical Western diet where you had been eating a lot of foods that were fortified with D and B12, and now you're not eating that crap anymore, but it was fortified. But now you're not eating those foods anymore. Now you're eating foods that provide zero B12 and zero vitamin D. So what happens if you're not taught to now start paying attention to those two very, very important nutrients, then you become deficient in them. And I've known people who have basically, raw vegans, died because they weren't paying attention to D and B12 because they simply weren't taught about it. B12 gets sprayed on cereal as it goes into the box at the packaging plant. So that's where a lot of people are getting their B12 from, because their bodies are not capable of making it, because they're eating garlic or they got other things going on in their lives, too much stress, because stress just blows through B12. So they're not taught about testing their B12 as a vegan, as a raw vegan, or testing their vitamin D. I call it D+, and people say, why whenever you write vitamin D, do you always put a plus sign after the D? Well, Dave knows, but a lot of people don't know. The reason why the plus sign is there, and I'm the only one who uses the plus sign after the D, is because sunshine doesn't make just vitamin D in your skin. Oh no, right? It makes a whole bunch of other nutrients that do not come from food, and you can't get them in supplement form. Oh no, now what do we do if we're living in Canada or living in upstate New York and during the winter when the sun isn't strong enough? All right, relax. There's workarounds for just about everything. And that's another thing that I specialize in, is workarounds so that we can be as healthy as our bodies are capable of being. So we can be a number 10. You get a phototherapy device. It's a little light box, about that tall, that wide, and it just mimics the wavelength of the sun, the UVB rays, not the UVA rays that harm you and age your skin, just the UVB rays. See, here's where technology can actually provide a device which is not an improvement on Mother Nature, but allows it to give you what Mother Nature can't if you're living not near the equator, which is where we were supposed to live. So now you're living up in Canada, upstate New York, or whatever, places in Europe where you can't get strong enough sunshine all year round, blah, blah, blah. So you just get a phototherapy device. Now you'll get enough D and all the plus, all that the plus, includes, those other nutrients, which some of them are now being found to be more important to the immune system than vitamin D. And we all know how important vitamin D is to the immune system. So, and how do I come to these conclusions or realizations? How do I discover this stuff? It's very simple. I just sit there on the couch and I think about things. Well, what about the other? Are there any nutrients that don't come from food? Well, it turns out, yes, there are. And then one day I asked, hey, all right, I'm learning all about vitamin D and how important it is. Is it the only thing that sunshine makes? Let me just see in case it makes other things. It doesn't seem like it does because I've read all these articles. Now I have access to the internet and I don't see anything other than vitamin D. Get out in the sunshine and between 10 and 2, be careful, blah, blah, blah. Vitamin D, but they don't mention anything else. Let me go see. So I find out, oh my God, it makes other things that don't come from any food and you can't get them in supplement form. So people who are just following advice of raw vegan educators, the ones that do talk about vitamin D, they'll say, all right, well, get your vitamin D during your summer, and then you live in New York, don't worry about it. You'll make enough to carry you through the winter. the months where the sunshine isn't strong enough to make vitamin D in your skin. Well, first of all, that's not normal for human beings. That's another thing. I pass things by the nature test. In nature, we were getting vitamin D, strong enough sunshine to make vitamin D all year round. But then we started roaming away from the equatorial regions to
Okay.
regions farther north. So, that's what happens. We're no longer, Dave, we're no longer living in our biological eco niche. And whenever you're not living in your biological eco niche, now you really got to start thinking about, all right, is there anything special I have to be doing to compensate for the fact that A, I'm not living in my biological eco niche, B, I'm eating foods that nature is not growing for me. They're being grown by agri-industry, and agri-industry grows for yield and appearance and size and growth rate and pest resistance and shelf life and sugar content, but they're not growing for nutritional content except for two nutrients, and they only have to put those two in, or because if they don't, nothing will grow, and they can't grow crop after crop after crop after crop, and they want to be able to grow crop after crop after crop on the same soil because they're growing stuff to make profit. That's their main goal, profit. So they're not going to put back anything into the soil that they don't absolutely have to do. And we now know what the three things that have to go back into the soil: NPK, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. But they're not putting back in sodium, they're not putting in iodine, they're not putting all the other things in. So that's why it is possible for raw vegans to bump up against nutritional insufficiencies unless you grow all your own food on soil that you know to be really, really good. How many people out there are doing that? Raise your hands. I don't see any hands going up.
Yeah. So it's a lost art of critical thinking and logical thinking, and we appreciate you, Don, doing it and helping encourage others to do it. So where do you think this cognitive dissonance comes from? Because you do see a lot of folks, and maybe it's a romantic notion of, that they start to eat foods from nature and fruits and vegetables, and they think, oh, this is so beautiful. I have this romantic notion. I would love to get everything I need just from nature. And is that what's going on, or how can people that are supposedly, you know, so knowledgeable and experienced, how are they missing the points that you're raising here? What do you think's going on where people say, you know what, let's just dismiss the vitamin D issue and kind of brush over it, or the vitamin B12 issue, or some of these other supplements or vitamins?
Well, most people, if you don't know something and you want to start pursuing it, you want to try and find someone that will be a teacher, someone you can follow and that gives you the information you need. Now, nowadays, you can just bring up an AI chatbot and keep your fingers crossed that it knows the things that I know, because a lot of things that I know aren't on the internet, and that's where chatbots learn from, is the internet. So there's a potential sore point there with AI chatbots. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to learn. I mean, you go to a school to learn certain things. You pick certain classes in college to learn certain things that you want to know, that you need to know for what you want to do in life, etc. So if you want to start learning about diet and lifestyle practices, well, you find someone to learn from. And so that's fine. But the problem comes in is when that person is themselves miseducated. I won't even get into if you have the misfortune to find someone who's a charlatan, who appears to be, very caring and nice, but they're actually just out for profit. So they're going to teach things that maximize their profit, not necessarily your health. Those are, fortunately, they're the exception, not the rule. And the rule is a lot of very well-intentioned, well-meaning people who just had the misfortune to be miseducated by somebody who was miseducated by somebody. And, that's why I say you learn as a researcher, not as a student, because we have way more people out there teaching about raw vegan diets who have been miseducated than have been totally 100% properly educated to
Wow.
know, about all the nutrition, how to get it enough of all, which is an expression of mine. How do you get enough of all of the nutrients that we require for optimal health. And you don't want to be learning from someone who has certain biases. There are people who don't want to believe that we need to take nutritional supplements. There are people who are opposite that. That's what they were taught. We don't need nutritional supplements. Then when I present what I present to them, they go, oh, it appears that we do. They can handle it more like Mr. Spock, very logically, critical thinking skills, caring about their health, and they don't have any, biases. But there are some people who have a bias. No, I believe this person when he says we don't need them and they're just a ripoff and it's a scam. It's conspiracy. They're conspiring to fill us with all these supplements that we don't need that bring our health down. They buy into that. So when they meet me, they just write me off as one of those conspiracy people, or I'm selling. You know how many people just assume I sell the supplements I talk about?
Don doesn't sell any supplements. So just for the listener, just so you understand.
Right. So where's the motivation for me recommending them as highly as I do if I don't sell them? And I chose not to sell them. I could have. Other people do, and they make lots of money doing it. And people have told me, no, you talk about good supplements, so why not sell them? You should make some money. Because there are people who, once they realize I sell them, are going to assume, and understandably so, that I'm just selling it to make money. And it's just all BS that I'm saying. So I figured if I don't sell it, what are they going to say? That's not an affiliate link. So now what are they going to say? What else could be my reason for recommending it as highly as I do, other than, oh, maybe it is helpful. Maybe he is making sense. And then they read an article. They understand how the agri industry works and how they grow for profit, not for nutritional value, etc. And then they read the article about the 7 different raw vegan diets. They read an article that I wrote about how and why people fail on the raw vegan diet because they're just not getting enough of all. And yeah, so I talk about the big 3 nutrients that are the most problematic for raw vegans is D and B12, as we spoke about before, but iodine is the other one. It's normally supposed to be a food-provided nutrient. So why can't we, even with a really good supplement like Daily Green Boost, it's a green powder you add in that helps you get enough of all the other vitamins and minerals, but even that doesn't supply nearly enough iodine, just because it's so difficult to get iodine into agri-industry, into agricultural growing. You can find it in nature, but none of us are eating directly from nature, or we're living somewhere where there's very poor iodine content of the soils. So that's a hiccup. So DB12 and iodine are the big three, which accounts for people failing to thrive on a raw vegan diet, or even on a typical Western diet, although they're getting, where are they getting their iodine from? From using table salt. They're sprinkling iodized table salt on everything they eat. Okay, so that's how they're getting their iodine from. But I don't know too many raw vegans who are sprinkling table salt on everything they eat. They usually don't use table salt. Okay, so now where are they getting their iodine from? Unless you know about it, you might have to supplement on that specifically, and maybe D and B12. So that's why I've called those 3 the big 3. They're the most problematic nutrients.
And this raises a good point, talking about the iodine, because then you kind of have like the opposite end of the spectrum where people will overprescribe information and they'll say, oh yeah, just go take some iodine and kind of like just give you this quick solution. One thing that Don Bennett does is he's very careful to give out information that's going to be tricky, or that maybe the listener is not going to be able to implement. So for example, iodine, there's so many side issues with it. What companion nutrients should you take with it? What dosages should you take? What kind should you take? And what protocol should you follow? So this is something that Don will work with one-on-one with individuals, coaching about iodine as well as the other nutrients. But talk to us about iodine in particular, because it's kind of more of a tricky supplement to figure out how to implement. Would you agree with that, or how would you kind of characterize that?
Oh no, it's the trickiest. It's the most problematic. for because it's the least our foods don't have it. The agri-grown foods don't have it. You're not using salt, and it's so important. All the cells of all your organs have an iodine receptor on them. Now, if that doesn't show you, all right, here's something else that'll show you how important iodine is. Anyone who's done any thyroid testing because they think they might have had a problem with their thyroid, they go to medical doctor. Medical doctor says, "Hey, you got all the symptoms of hypothyroidism. Let's see. Let's do a thyroid panel." So they'll do TSH, free T3, free T4, and maybe a few others. Well, T3 and T4 are two hormones the thyroid makes, and a lot of people watching this know that for one reason or another. So T3 and T4. But go ahead and ask your endocrinologist, well, what does the 3 and the 4 in T3 and T4 represent? Some of them don't even know. They represent atoms of iodine. And they don't know that? Wait a second. If the 3 and 4 and T3 and T4, two thyroid hormones, represent atoms of iodine, doesn't that mean iodine must be pretty important to the thyroid? Well, yeah, it does. Of all your organs, which one requires the most iodine? The thyroid. Oh, okay. So when you go to the endocrinologist and he's suspecting maybe hypothyroidism, and he does all those thyroid tests and TSH, why isn't he doing iodine tests? Oh, now you start to wonder. Now you're going down the rabbit hole. Could it possibly be that the medical industry maybe is being influenced by the pharmaceutical industry? And maybe the pharmaceutical industry hates iodine just like they hate vitamin D. They hate anything that'll improve our health, because as our health improves, the health of their profits goes down. And they don't want that. They want profits going up. So that's why they hate certain nutrients, and they try to affect the medical industry by putting money behind the medical schools so they can control what doctors learn. And again, it's a rabbit hole I've gone down. I've wrote articles on it, and it's very sad, but it's human nature, sadly. But yeah, so iodine, beside that, it's very difficult to do it safely. Of those 3 problematic nutrients, D, B12, and iodine, I've written articles, DIY articles, on B12 and D. You just read those articles. Maybe you have to read them more than once, but you can take care of those yourself. You don't need any counseling. But I tried to write one for iodine, and I couldn't. It's too complicated. There's too much testing that has to be done. You got to look at the results of multiple tests, not just thyroid tests, but there's 2 iodine tests. And even some places in Europe that will test your iodine, they only do one of the 2 tests. But you need 2 tests to understand really what's going on with your iodine level. Then you got to know how much to take. You got to educate the person you're working with. So if they start to get symptoms, negative symptoms, don't just assume, oh, okay, I guess I can't take iodine. No, they need to be educated to know that the iodine they're taking now, for the first time in a long time, copious amounts of iodine, and that iodine is bumping out bromine that had been illegally parked in iodine receptor sites, and now the bromine is mobilized, giving you all kinds of symptoms. So the iodine is not the primary cause of your symptoms. It's just a secondary cause. It's bromine detoxification that's the primary. And how do you learn all this from an article? So that's why I work with people. I make sure they're educated so they can recognize what's going on and they don't misinterpret what's going on. And you don't want to take too much. And even before you start taking iodine, you got to do the thyroid testing to make sure you don't have any hot nodules, because then taking iodine is like throwing gasoline on a fire. You don't want to do that. Then you also got to make sure that you have enough selenium and a few other nutrients before you start taking iodine. So it's really very complicated. And that's why I wasn't able to write a DIY article for it. So I just said, all right, I'll counsel people in that.
Yes.
And I'll add in D and B12 just to make it easier for them.
And you can read all these articles. Don has very in-depth articles on all these nutrients, iodine, D3, B12 at health101.org. The iodine issue it's a great example of, like you said, something that the drug companies love to hate. It's super cheap. You can't patent it. And there's nothing there for them, but yet it's a powerful ingredient and a raw material that our body uses, the cells in our body. I want to ask you, Don Bennett, from health101.org, about the difference between what is the difference between misinformation and disinformation? Because to the listener out there, kind of our number one job is to discern the truth in this world. And we're constantly being, in some cases, lied to, or in other cases, we're just being influenced by someone who really doesn't know what they're talking about, but they have good intentions. And so, how does the listener kind of discern the path? And what is the difference between disinformation and misinformation? Because I've heard you talk about both of those.
Yeah, disinformation and misinformation, they are both false, inaccurate information. It's the delivery that differs. So if you're getting misinformation from somebody, that person may be very well intentioned, well meaning, a family member, a loved one, uh, and they think they know what they know, but they're telling you, they're sharing with you some information that is actually incorrect. And hopefully, if you can then find out that it's incorrect and you share it with them, they'll be teachable enough to say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm glad you told me." Some people are a little too arrogant to react that way. But now disinformation, on the other hand, is also incorrect information, but the person giving it out knows it's incorrect. And they're generally not well-intentioned and well-meaning. They have ulterior motives. So there are people who talk about certain things, presenting them to you, as factual when they're not, and they know it's not factual. In other words, some raw vegan educators believe that we don't need nutritional supplements. They honestly believe that. So of course they're going to share their honest opinion about that. Even though they're incorrect, they're going to share that opinion. There are other raw vegan educators who know that it isn't true, but are going to say it anyway, because the last thing they want is for you to look into your nutrition, because they're selling something else that they're saying, no, this is what you need. You need this. And what they're selling is not what you need, but they don't want you even thinking about. And if you say, well, Don Bennett said, well, no, Don doesn't know what he's talking about. And these are very disreputable people. Again, as I mentioned before, they're the exception rather than the rule in the vegan and raw vegan communities. But they do exist. And I've counseled a lot of people who found them initially and started learning from them. And yeah, they teach 90% of the same stuff I teach. So 90% of what they teach, I teach. But it's that 10% that they teach that I do not teach that is incorrect and that can cause you to fail 20 or 30 or 40 years down the road. And when that happens, you can't point back to them and point a finger at them and take them to court. And they know this. So they feel very safe in recommending the things they recommend in order to make maximal amounts of money. And it's just sad. That's why, in my private life, I was taught by my grandmother, if you can't say something nice about somebody, don't say anything at all. Thanks, Granny. And that's in my private life. In my professional life, oh no. If I see someone teaching something that I know is incorrect, factually, objectively incorrect, I'm going to shine a light on it. I'm going to let people know. And, without accusing, without saying, maybe I don't know why this person is doing it. Maybe I'll assume they were just misinformed. Maybe I don't know enough about them to know that if they're doing it, disinformation kind of thing. And that's why when I started realizing that other people were teaching about raw vegan diets, I said, okay, good. Oh, wait, let me vet them. Let me see, why they're teaching what they're teaching. Who did they learn from? Once I realized there was misinformation, conflicting information in the raw vegan community, I said, okay, from this day forth, anybody who's teaching, I want to vet them to see why are they teaching what they're teaching, if what they're teaching has any incorrect information in it. And if they're teachable, and I found plenty of educators that are teachable, and they were just amazed that they were teaching something that was incorrect, and they corrected what they teach. Now, others, no. And sadly, some of the others who are not teachable, who have painted themselves into a corner and just they dig in their heels, and they'll even go to the extent of saying, well, Don Bennett is a very well-meaning, well-intentioned person. He just doesn't know what I know. And I know that you don't need nutritional, whatever it is. And they're intelligent enough to know, if they're more intelligent than I am, then they're certainly intelligent enough to know that what I'm saying is correct. Yet they don't want to, do a 180 on what they were teaching. Is it for fear of people saying, oh my God, this person I was following just admitted they were wrong about something. My whole world is shattered. Now I don't know. Do I continue following this person? Do I not? So they want to avoid that. So they just dig in their heels and continue to say the same thing that they've always said. And that's not in the best interest of the people they counsel. It's irresponsible, in my opinion. Because if I'm teaching something that's incorrect, I want to know about it. I want people to tell me, no, you're not correct about this. And I'll look into it. And if they're correct, I'll correct what I was teaching. And I'll let everybody know. I'll post it on my Facebook group. I was wrong about such and such. Now, you want to try to avoid that, but you avoid it not by just refusing to do it, but by being a good enough researcher where you don't get into that situation where you'd have to make that admission. And again, this is health we're talking about. So and another reason I don't want to get into that situation, that I've been teaching something wrong for a number of years, and oh my God, I can't believe it was wrong. So that's why I didn't start counseling until I learned enough, because of the awesome responsibility that it is.
That's a great point. And there's a lot of coaches that have been out there, and maybe they've been learning about this for a year or 2 years, and they start coaching people. And I'm not judging anybody, but like Don just said, really take the time and invest in your own knowledge and your own knowledge set. We're talking with Don Bennett, who is going to be speaking at Texas Fruit Festival, which is going to happen at the end of September in Austin, Texas. You can get all the details at texasfruitfestival.com. We're really looking forward to it. I have a couple more questions for Don. I want to ask about this Facebook group, which if you're on Facebook, it's called the Healthiest Raw Vegan Diet Facebook group. And it's a very lively, spirited discussion constantly. And I want to ask Don, because Don is in there for free constantly, just answering people's questions and giving people responses and information. And where Don gets the energy, I don't know. But Don gets a lot of, some people can be very critical. And, how do you deal with the kind of the haters, the criticism? Because I would say your response is 90% positive, but then, there's 10% of people that just kind of like come at you. And so how do you deal with that, as you have an impact on reaching people?
I just channel Mr. Spock. And I just
You really do.
very logically say, well, here's the facts. Read this article and tell me what you think of it. Now, a lot of times they won't even read the article, because I think subconsciously they're afraid of realizing or discovering that what they're saying is actually incorrect, and they'd have to say, oops, my bad. And they don't like to admit who was that TV character that could never admit he was wrong about anything? It was the Fonz on Happy Days. He couldn't say the word He couldn't say I was wrong. He's one of those kind of people. So, and they just disappear very quickly. When I bring the receipts and I bring the facts and I say, here's the article, because I've written just about everything there is to write about these subjects, so I don't have to go on and on about it. I just put a link there. Just here, the answer, and which will explain why what you're thinking is incorrect in reality. But this assumes, and I always add in there, this assumes you truly care about your future health. If you don't really care about your future health, yeah, we can argue all day about this. Or you can go on believing whatever you want to believe, that we don't need nutritional supplements or they're bad for you or whatever. And believe me, 95% of all the nutritional supplements, by the way, sold out there in the stores, in the health food stores, are crap. And they're totally waste of money. All they do is give you expensive urine. But that's 95%. That's not 100%. So there's still 5% of worthwhile nutritional supplements that help you. So you don't need to be, anyone who says, oh no, supplements are good, you should be taking them, and here's a list of 15 supplements you need to take every week or every month. No, you're again throwing money away. So you just have, there's a middle ground there between no supplements at all and tons of supplements. The middle ground is just only what you need. And some people are capable of making enough of their own B12 so they don't even need to take a B12 supplement. But you only know that by testing. And I teach people this. Oh, by the way, this Texas Fruit Festival, it's occurring over a weekend. And this will be a weekend that you will remember for the rest of your life. And for a lot of people, the info that you'll get is not only life-changing, but it could be life-saving. So I really wholeheartedly suggest that if you can make it down to Austin, Texas, please do.
Wow, that was a great pitch. Thank you, Don, for helping promote the Texas Fruit Festival. And I mean, it's going to be a nonstop party, 3 days, hanging out with Don Bennett, hanging out with Karen Ramsey, hanging out with so many.
John Kohler, Samuel Markowski, so many good,
Yes.
the cream of the crop.
It's going to be great speakers. There's going to be sound healing. There's going to be speed dating, live music.
Oh, wait, speed dating?
Uh, yes, we by popular demand, from the guests, they wanted that for this year, and we try to make this event as accessible as possible, unlimited fruit, and so basically, as of now, the ticket is $49. We want this to be accessible to anyone who's committed to learning and improving their health, and so TexasFruitFestival.com for all the details.
Is that $49 per day?
That's for the entire event.
Folks, this is a steal. This is the best $49 you will ever spend. Even if you have to travel from places where you have to fly down here and get a hotel room, still what you end up spending, invaluable what you're going to walk away with.
So I hope you'll be there with us and can join us for that. As we wrap up here, I want to ask you one other question, Don, which is, you've helped a lot of people with their health. You see people taking this into their own hands, thinking back 50 years when you were first learning about this, and now looking at now where a lot of this information is becoming mainstream and people are finding out about it. At the same time, chronic health problems are exploding, and then you see other part of the population that are just getting sicker and sicker. And so, I guess my question to you is, what do you make of the times that we're in, and where do you see things going? Are you optimistic? Are you bummed out? Or how do you look at kind of the human species in this moment that we're in right now and where we're going?
People have asked me, do you think we're going to make it as a species? And I'm like, well, but there was a time when I would have said, and I did say, nah, not going to make it. Now I think there's some glimmers of hope because of the internet, because of certain, not all chatbots, AI chatbots, but certain AI chatbots that are more unbiased than others. That's a good sign, although they're not perfect yet, because again, as I said before, chatbots learn from what they find on the internet, and they don't see a lot of my stuff on the internet, although there's one chatbot that does acknowledge my work on the internet, on my website. There's now a chance. We've got some better people in positions of high authority, like at NIH and Department of Health on the national level. So that's good. That can make a difference. They themselves have to be careful. They can't just say the things that I'm saying, because that's just going to paint huge targets on their back. And I want these people to stay alive, because they are helping to get food dyes out of food, to get better food into lunch programs for kids in schools. So there's hope, and the more people that learn, I'm sure a lot of the people that have learned from me are going to go out and are going out and teaching. So that's, yeah. So now there's hope. I think when I didn't think there was a lot of hope, maybe, 20, 30 years ago, now I do think there's hope.
Wow. Wow. Well, we'll leave that on an encouraging note. So we've been talking with Don Bennett. You've got to check out Don Bennett's work, whether it's the articles he's written at health101.org or joining his Facebook group, The Healthiest Raw Vegan Diet, or checking out his books, or meeting Don Bennett at Texas Fruit Festival. And Don, talk to us a little bit about the articles you were mentioning that got voted as your most well-read articles.
Yeah, that's here. I don't know. I'm sharing my screen now. If you can pop this up, this is the
Yep.
link. This is the link to that page on my website, health101.org/reading.
Health101.org/reading, and health101.org in general is just such a great free resource that Don Bennett has put together. We're very grateful. Last question for Don Bennett. What's next for Don Bennett? Two-part question. Where do you get all your energy to continue all the work you're doing? And, what keeps you going, and kind of what's next on your radar that you're up to and that you're working on?
Just the work I do with the Facebook group that I'm in, that I admin. People say, well, when are you going to write your next book? I'm like, yeah, everything that needs to be written has already been written. There's nothing new. There's nothing new we're discovering. So there's nothing new that needs to be written. So I just now point people to the, whatever appropriate article there is that I've written over the last half century. What keeps me going is just knowing that I'm helping. I'm playing a part. I'm helping people avoid degenerative disease. Because a lot of it is avoidable. I've given talks to women's groups, and they say, well, thank you very much for talking about how to prevent breast cancer, but I know I'm going to get breast cancer. And I'm like, well, why would you say that? Because all the women in my family get breast cancer, so I know I'm going to get it, but thank you for talking to us today. I said, wait a second, well, hang on. If all the women in your family are doing the things that help to cause breast cancer and not doing the things that help the body to prevent breast cancer, well, why wouldn't they all get breast cancer? So if you're behaving the way they are, why wouldn't you get breast cancer? So the whole idea is the stuff that I was just talking about to prevent breast cancer and how to help your body, deal with it in case you get an errant cell. We all get cancerous cells. I've got them in my body right now. Dave has them. Everybody watching this has a cell that just became technically cancerous. It's now dividing at an unnatural rate, not an uncontrollable rate, which is what the oncologists will say, but at an unnatural rate. The body has different various mechanisms to nip that in the bud, shut that right down. And so you never get a diagnosis of cancer. Well, that's what we want. So I don't mind cancerous cells. I do mind a diagnosis of cancer. So it is possible to avoid that. You just need the knowledge, and again, learn as a researcher and not as a student.
Well, there you have it from Don Bennett, health101.org, speaker at Texas Fruit Festival in September in Austin, Texas, texasfruitfestival.com. We will see you there. I'm so looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Don Bennett.
Thanks, Dave.
For more information, please follow at Rapid Regeneration or visit rapidregeneration.com.